not a real problem for me with the CT.
Yeah. No, it's something.
Sure.
But it's, my guess is I probably lowered my A1C by
I think it's going to be a second home.
Okay.
being at home.
And I think we're going to get a contract on 79 today.
We're eating right, and we're doing a little
As you're
bit.
going on the way out,
Geez, I just logged up.
off of Island,
Mr. Hennigan?
Yes.
on the right, kind of
Okay.
renovated house.
Let me just try a couple of things.
Like
Test, test,
in
test.
from Island Drive,
Anybody hear me?
Island Drive South.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so
Good,
I think
good.
we may get two contracts.
If I talk like this from here, is that good in the back? Will that be good online?
Take this off though, because it's muffled. But he looks good. He looks good, but this sounds muffled. Can you hear me? Doesn't it sound like muffled?
Sounds normal.
Sounds normal?
That's how you always sound, Lisa.
So in our experience, people in the room can hear you with the mask on. However, people who are listening on the phone cannot hear if you're wearing a mask. So if you're comfortable taking your mask off while you're speaking in the mic, that is preferred. If you're not, then please feel free to keep it on.
Do I have a choice? Can I change my mind and go home? Give me 1 second to ensure that my phone is not going to be a negative contributor. Okay. Good morning. Call to order the June 11th Septic to Sewer Advisory Committee meeting at Town Hall. In attendance, roll call, and then the online roll call. And we'll start with a statement pursuant to Executive Order number 20-69, issued by the Office of Governor Ron DeSantis on March 20th, 2020. Municipalities may conduct meetings of their governing boards without having a quorum of its members present physically or at any set specific location, and utilizing communications media technology such as telephonic or video conferencing, as provided by Section 120.545B2 Florida statutes. Procedures for public comment will be explained by the Assistant Town Clerk shortly. The members of the Septic to Sewer Committee Advisory Committee appearing remotely for this meeting are Art Zeb and Roy Shins.
The agenda, the material for each item on the agenda, and the notice regarding the virtual meeting were made available beginning June 5th, 2020 on the town's website, and also available in the town clerk's office during business hours. The public was given the opportunity to submit public comments to the town clerk prior to the meeting. The town has developed several new methods ensuring public comment for a virtual meeting. Any person may be heard by the Septic to Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee members through teleconference and upon registering with the town clerk pursuant to the published notice to speak for not more than 3 minutes on any item on the agenda. Since this is a virtual meeting, as authorized by the Governor of the State of Florida, members of the public wishing to address the body may do so by the Assistant Town Clerk will unmute the public once the chairman has called for public comment. Persons interested in speaking may speak up to voice their public comment. Do not unmute your physical phone until you are ready to make a comment. Remute your phone once you have completed your comment. Persons who cannot access the meeting by teleconferencing using a computer with speaker capabilities or through a smartphone application can call Town Hall at 561-732-2635 and notify the Town Hall staff of their public comment. The Town Hall staff will notify the Assistant Town Clerk, who shall read the public comment into record. These public comment options established for the virtual Septic to Sewer Citizens Advisory Committee meeting comply with sections 286.0114 and section 120.54 Florida statutes. The public that is physically present for the Septic Citizens Advisory Committee may participate in public comment by coming up to the podium. Those that wish to place a public comment using the podium but are currently located in the patio area, please proceed to enter the chambers one at a time. from the side door that has the open sign on the yellow paper. The podium will be immediately to the right once you have entered the chambers from the side door. Facial covering must be worn at all times and only removed to speak into the microphone. A town staff member will disinfect the podium after each use between speakers. The town of Ocean Ridge has a facial covering requirement and also encourages the public to practice social distancing. All chairs within the town hall have been measured to comply with the 6-foot social distancing requirement. No touch hand stations have been placed next to the podium as well as next to the entrance of the town hall. Tips for virtual meetings. Try to use one device. Do not attend the meeting by using both computer and telephone at the same time, as you will experience feedback with a strong echo and will not be able to hear participants of the meeting properly. Mute your phone if you are attending by telephone or computer. Those that do not mute their phone can cause disruptions into the meeting. Do not mute yourself. If you are attending by GoToMeeting application or a computer, please do not unmute yourself. The assistant town clerk will unmute persons after public comment is called by the chairman.
I don't know if you guys can hear me, this is Roy, but those of us on the phone cannot hear that mic. We could hear Mr. Hennigan's, but not this one.
I'm gonna keep going, I'm almost there. If you have physically muted your phone, please unmute only after public comment is called for, and the assistant town clerk has alerted the public to unmute. After you have made your comment, make sure to mute your phone again. The information in the chat box is public record. Please keep in mind that all comments in the chat box become public record after the meeting. Call Town Hall if experiencing technical difficulties. Town Hall phones will be available for persons to call if they are experiencing any technical difficulties or any issues in getting into the call. Please call 561-732-2635.
Okay, we're done with the public service announcement?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please.
Sure. Chair Hennigan,
Present.
Member Kern,
Present.
Member Liscum,
Present.
Member Shines,
Present.
Vice Chair Zev.
Present.
Could we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? Pledge allegiance to
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you for those that are in attendance. Thank you for those that are online. It's good to hear you again, Roy. Art, good morning. First item would be approval of the minutes. I'd like to make a comment concerning the approval of the minutes. It's been quite a while since we had a meeting. The first thing I wanted to do to start the meeting was to ground us in what had happened before. And I have to say, this is one of the best sets of minutes that I've encountered. Whoever put this together
Thank you.
has got, take a bow. Whoever put this together, you've got a good future as either a court stenographer or as a historian, because the give and take in the meeting was pretty dynamic. It's well captured. I only had one word that I had any question of whether it was correct or not, and I'll point that out in a second.
Which one, January or February?
I'm talking about the February one.
Okay.
It's, if you've read the minutes, you know where we are, you know where we need to go. And between those sets of minutes, and if you were familiar or were able to listen in to the last town commission meeting, you are clearly up to speed on the issues that are before us and where we're going to be going in the next one or two meetings. So, does anyone else have any comments on the minutes?
No, well done.
I think my comment was, where did I put my minutes? Right here. I think it's on page 7 or 8 of the February minutes. Yes, here we go. Actually, excuse me, it's on page 2. Come down about a little over halfway on the page, and you can see the word sooner in the left of the column. And I believe that should have probably been longer rather than sooner. Can anyone else parse that sentence and see if that?
Yes, I see.
So that's my only, that's, other than my commendation, that's the only comment I have. Is there a motion to approve the minutes for January and February?
So moved.
Is there a second?
A second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Is that 1 or 2?
That was Arthur.
Thank you, Arthur. Roy?
Sorry, I was muted, I said aye.
Thank you. It's unanimous. Minutes are approved.
Mr. Hennigan, we've had a request from the town clerk to, for people to speak directly into the microphone and speak louder.
Is anyone having trouble hearing the chair?
No, the chair is fine. We had a little trouble hearing the other mic.
Okay, thank you. Noted. All right, so it's time for public comment. Kathy, do you have a statement about the public comment?
I can read it again, sure. The chair will invite the public to speak to the committee. Public comments are on specific agenda items. Items may be made later in the meeting and when the items are taken up at the discretion of the committee. There is a 3-minute individual limit for public comments that will be timed by the clerk. Public comment is not meant for a question and answer period, and there will be no dialogue. Anyone wishing to speak during public comment can come up to the podium and print your name and address on the sheet provided and state your name and address for the record. You do need to provide your own pen.
So, Kathy, do you see people that are online that are requesting to make public comment?
I do not see anything in the chat for public comment, no.
Nothing?
No.
Anything from the audience here? Okay, so public comment then I guess is closed. Agenda items. So we're going to pick up where we left off as was reflected in the minutes. An environmental impact evaluation was going to be conducted by Ingenuity with Lisa Trepepi and by the member of this committee, Ron Kern. During the lull that we've had of a couple of months, that was done, and Mr. Kern, I believe, is going to present. You have the floor, sir.
Ready to go. First, I would like to introduce Kim Kyle right there. She's a project engineer who works for Ingenuity, and of course everyone knows Lisa, this was a collaboration, okay, between myself and Ingenuity to come up with basically this model, okay. There were 3, we'll call it 4 objectives that you laid out in the February meeting. Just to review, they were to combine the package plant into an RSF and RSE data and county health department's calculations to get a daily sewage volume. Number 2 was number of residential units that were needed. Number 3, size of Ocean Ridge in square miles and acreage, the population needed in the resulting density, sewage per area, per household, etc. And lastly, and probably most importantly, was to determine and quantify the reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus loads attainable. Those were the objectives, and I believe we tackled them all. And in your package, you should see a 2-page, let's call it nicely done spreadsheet by Kim, all right, that basically lays out the parameters of which this was done, these models taking place. Now,
Excuse me for a second, are we able to show that on any of the screens? Please? For at least the people here in attendance?
Here it is.
You want
That was the one that you just, yeah,
this one right here?
that's right there, that's the first one. That's a good
Okay.
start.
Is it able to come up on this screen, this set of screens?
No, we're only using this one right now,
That's
so there's
fine.
no
That's all I
interference,
need to
and
know.
no interference.
Okay, let's start off, and these are kind of laid out in objective order. So there are a number of assumptions, okay, that had to be made here. The data, unless we went house to house in Ocean Ridge and knocked on every door, went to every building and says, do you have a toilet, okay, then we would have been able to come up with a perfect number. Other than doing that, which we don't have, we came up with our best estimate of what these were in both the multifamily units as well as the single-family units. Now, it isn't just a matter of the number of units that are registered in the town as taxpayers, because the fact is that in this town, there are other facilities, okay, that determine flow, and that's what we were looking at, flow, not the tax roll of how many houses were paying taxes. And the reason why that is because many of the multifamily homes, their common area, have clubhouses, they have ways to have showers, some of them have kitchens, and even in this building is not counted, okay, and they add to the flow.
Absolutely.
So in the big picture stuff, we tried to guess at what that units were in terms of the bigger picture. Now, the good news with that is that makes this thing more on the conservative side than it does, or if you a worst case scenario, because the number and the population is higher than what it may be if you just looked at the tax roll. So our best guess, and that's what I'll call it right now, at multifamily units, okay, they're 989. That comes pretty close, by the way, to the study that we did in October, that I did in October for the committee, where we took on the number of multifamily homes and the population. And it's extrapolated, it comes relatively close. I was a little lower, but again, I didn't consider in that clubhouses, et cetera. The single-family homes, that's another guess coming from town statistics that we got, as well as adding in other factors that I just previously mentioned. So we came up with a number of 1,717 total units. Right now, that's a pretty good guess. You can't use census data because it doesn't really add anything to it. So I think we may be on the high side, but on the other hand, it may even be higher than this, and we don't know that. But it's a good starting point, because remember the end game here, okay, is to determine what reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus, okay, there is, and that's where this all leads up to. So some other assumptions. Not everybody lives here 100% of the time. So we have a population of snowbirds and many of them are gone now. And the usage obviously drops. We've estimated that of the multifamily homes, 50% are seasonal. Where does that come from? It comes from, I live in one of those, and I've contacted 4 other multifamily homes, and they basically said, this is it's probably on the high side, but if you look at it on an annual average, it probably works out to somewhere around 50. We took a guess that 3 out of every 10 homes in Ocean Ridge, okay, were snowbirds or had a second home. Again, that only comes from from us based on talking to a few homeowners, looking around town, taking an educated guess. So now we come into mathematics. All right, if you take the 50 and the 30 and you use the 989 on your sheet and the 728, you come up with what the full-time and part-time statistics are in the town. You can see that on the full-time, the multifamily, since we talked to 50%, it's half of the 989, you get the 495, and that's split both ways. Full-time single family, because it's a 70-30 ratio, you see what it is, full-time and also part-time. There were some assumptions made on the number of people, okay, per multifamily and single-family homes. This ratio was kind of difficult to come up with. We could only use statistics from places that we knew, and it appears in the more of the retirement communities, multifamily, it's not 2, but somewhere between 1.5 and 2, there are many owners, single owners in these places. We came up with 1.6 as a number of the number of people in multifamily units, and 2.5 from those in single-family homes. Again, these numbers are challengeable, but in the big picture, it won't change the bottom line number a whole lot. Even if it changed it by 10%, you'll see the results at the end. You could wrestle me to the floor on any one of these, and I'd give up. So the full-time population then comes into view. The applied statistic analysis here tells me that the full-time population's about 2,065, and the part-time is about 1,337. We've come up with a total population of 3,402, and that includes what we believe is the flow rate, including places that actually are not habitable but are part of the community. This is the baseline of our statistics. And I believe that the number that's important here is the 3,402, which is the total population. This kind of sets the groundwork for how much, if we went to a municipal sewer system, how much of the population, how much of it would be used in the flow, and we'll get to that in a second. The second question was, or the third question was, the size of Ocean Ridge in square miles. Lisa was of big help with that because they have a municipal boundary in her AutoCAD, which she showed me, and that includes, there's this big rectangle that starts at Briney and goes to the inlet, and we brought it down to 1 square mile, and this is just facts, 646 acres. And if you take the population, 3,402, you divide it by the 646, you come up with 5.27 people per gross acre. Not quite sure where this becomes useful unless this is for grant purposes, and or Chairman Hannigan was trying to test my applied statistics. So I'm not quite sure, but in any case, this is what we believe in the town of Ocean Ridge there are in 1 acre, okay, of land and water, which is strange. Okay, that takes care of objective number 1, 2, and 3. Now we get into the meat of the matter, which is number 4, which was determine the quantity reduction of nitrogen and phosphorus. As we mentioned back in October and especially in February, the reason why we're going to do this is nitrogen and phosphorus, along with potassium, make up nitrates. Nitrate is the bad guy. Okay, nitrate's the one that goes and forms algae and chokes the water. So therefore, the elimination of this is important. So we went to some statistics, and the first one is how many gallons per person a day is water usage? Doesn't matter what kind of water usage, it's water usage. And this comes from the EPA, all right? And the EPA has determined that the average person uses 60 gallons of water per day. I tested that, okay, against since I have a fairly large volume plant, and I come up to 63 gallons. Okay, so we believe that that number is a good number, and we used it to determine our flow,
And may even be conservative.
and that may be conservative. Although these days I find, since you brought it up, I find the usage going down. I can only tell that from the plant that I run, which is fairly large. Where it used to be 30,000 gallons a day, I'm down about 15% overall. And the reason for that is that there are renovations and toilets these days and other impacts. There's less gallons used, okay, to flush a toilet. There's less gallons used for other energy efficient appliances that use water. So we see it going down a bit, and since the population is relatively stable, you find that this may be higher, may be lower, but right now I'm seeing a slight decrease, okay, in the amount of gallons per day usage. And that's good news because the water bill's lower too. And then when you see it in the big picture, you can draw that conclusion. So if you take the 60 gallons per day, all right, and you multiply it by the population numbers that I just mentioned a minute ago, okay, you get the minimum flow, all right, and it comes out to about 124,000 gallons per day. And on the peak flow, almost double it. You get 204,000 gallons per day. Again, these numbers look good to me because I can justify that just from using the calculation of my own experiences.
I have a question.
Shoot.
Did we get any actual data from Boynton of the water that they send across to us, volumes at all?
I don't know what the town uses in water. I only could tell you what the water usage is in one facility.
Mr. Chairman, oh, you can't hear me, I can tell. Can you hear me?
No,
You have to speak really loud with the stuff.
Okay. The short's on. Hello? Hello?
you broke it.
Is the other mic working right here?
I think it's working.
Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning? Good morning. Yes, good morning.
There it is.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, committee members, guests, residents, everyone. This is Lisa Trapepi. Can you hear me
Clearly.
clearly?
Clearly.
Okay. We wanted to be able to utilize the federal standards as much as possible and to be consistent throughout our modeling. So we basically followed EPA's guidelines and EPA's statistics just to be consistent, to answer your question.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any other questions before we get into the reduction calculations, which is really the meat of the objective? Okay, moving on. First of all, when we talk about the reduction in calculations, you have to look at the variety of homes and multifamily units here and how they treat. We have three in the town. We have packaged plants with injection wells, we have packaged plants with drain fields, and we have septic systems with drain fields. Those are the three basic ones. Even the auxiliary facilities like this building and clubhouses, et cetera, they all utilize one of those three systems. So when you take a look at that, we exclude from this injection wells right off the top because injection wells do not touch, okay, any of the surface areas. There's no drain field. Injection wells put the effluent water down at 125 feet below the aquifer, it bubbles up through the sand and into the aquifer. That is tested both going from the injection well as well as the aquifer, and there's no chance, okay, of pollution at that point. So injection wells are eliminated from this. Now, I'm going to point out that injection wells are about 17% of the town's population. Okay, so it's a fairly large number. We've excluded from this because we were only asked to ask what the reduction in nitrogen and phosphorus was. We do not go after what happens after a drain field. We do not know what the amount of pollutants are between the drain field and the water.
Mr.
That's-
Kern, we've
yes.
had a request from the town clerk for you to speak closer to the microphone and a little bit louder. We could hear Lisa Trepeppi fine.
That's not a surprise. Okay, I'll try this. Maybe I'll just speak a little louder. In the case of the multifamily homes that use drain fields, again, and the septic systems as well, we could not determine, okay, what happens after a drain field. We know what the end result is. There are nitrates that form, and we know it pollutes. But there's no calculation, okay, from the drain field to the water that we can come up with and where we asked to do with this study. So it boils down to septic systems, okay, with drain fields, which are primarily the single-family residents. And those are the guys, for the most part, that have the biggest opportunity to have reductions if you went to a municipal system. So if you take a look at some statistics from the EPA, influent concentration, this is sewage going in, wastewater going in, and there's a range, and it was a large range, so we took the middle of the road. All right, we don't know where we actually sit in that. I have an idea, but it's only one plant. But the 50.5 sounds reasonable to me in total nitrogen. This is what we believe comes into, okay, a treatment, whatever, facility or septic tank. From that, also, in terms of phosphorus, there's 9 milligrams per liter. And again, the statistics come from the EPA. That is your baseline input. There's an assumption, okay? And again, this comes from a calculation from the Water Environmental Research Foundation, and it basically says that a septic tank reduction doesn't take out any nitrogen when it goes through the system. It just separates the wastewater from the solids. There is approximately a 6% reduction, okay, in phosphorus. Again, comes from the same statistics. Interesting enough is that once they leave the septic system, they go into a drain field. Drain fields do their job. In a drain field, nitrogen is reduced by 25%, and phosphorus is reduced by 90%. So the drain fields do a reasonable job of reducing the amount of nitrogen and phosphorus. Again, this comes from the EPA. Now, if you take those numbers and you look at the reduced concentration after a septic tank, now we're talking about just the calculations from the assumptions above. You can see that the concentration after a septic tank, there's no change. It was 50.5 going in, it's 50.5 going out, because the septic system does not take out any nitrogen. And you can see, since there's 6% reduction, okay, in the amount of phosphorus, it drops it from 9 to 8.48. So this is what we got after the septic tank. Now we go into a drain field. Again, this is the effluent. This is the output of a treated sewage. You end up with, since there's a reduction of 25%, you started with 50, you end up with 37, 38 milligrams of liter okay, of nitrogen, okay, the total phosphorus, because there's a 90% reduction at the 8.48 number, you come up with a less than 1 milligram per liter of phosphorus at the drain field. So, again, mathematics come into play here. If you multiply these together, from a septic and drain field total percentage of nutrient reduction by using a septic system, you basically get a 25% reduction in nitrogen and almost a 91% in phosphorus. Now, here's a statement of the obvious. If you go to a municipal system, this goes to zero, or 100% of it is taken, it doesn't go into the environment. So this is what the charter is here, is taking these kind of numbers. You can, again, play with all the statistics, but you can see there's an obvious fact. Septic systems with drain fields, okay, do create nitrates. If you go to a municipal sewer system, there are none. And that's basically the bottom line of the research. Questions?
Any questions online? Roy, Art, still with us?
Definitely still with you, no questions so far.
Thank you.
Same here.
Thank you, Art.
for that extensive analysis and presentation.
I'd love to take all the credit for it, but ingenuity was a big part of this. Kim knows how to do research like crazy, so it was really good to have her dig in there, and I have to say my role was to kind of verify a lot of the data with personal experience, but I want to thank them, and this is, I hope this answered the question, the objectives that you were looking for.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Kim. Okay, we'll move on. Next item on the agenda is looking at the costing, looking at the tax base. It's something I first proposed in my roadmap many months ago, that it was my desire to be able to show the distribution of property in the town, and to highlight differences in different sectors of that tax base. So the taxable value of property in the town is the funding engine, the grease for the wheels of the annual town budget. While not the only source, property taxes provide approximately, I think, 70% of the available revenue. Property tax is based on the assessed or taxable valuation by the Palm Beach property appraiser. Those valuations and various other descriptive property information are public, and they are available on the Palm Beach property appraiser's website, commonly known as PAPA. It's often used by the town, it's often used by realtors, it's available to you as a citizen to go look at your individual property. It has valuations, it has sales history, it has metrics on the size of your house. In most cases, it has a diagram of your property, the size of your property, and many other informative things. So I encourage you to familiarize yourself with it if you're so inclined. In order to conduct this report, a composite snapshot of all the Ocean Ridge data was requested from and provided by PAPA to the town of Ocean Ridge. Through the application of appropriate state, county, and city tax rates, your ad valorem taxes, which you commonly know as your property tax bill, are determined from these numbers that the property appraiser calculates. The rates are expressed as millages. In a simple sense, millage is dollars of tax per $1,000 of valuation. The rate for Ocean Ridge is 5.35. So for every $1,000 that your property is has a taxable evaluation, you would owe $5.35 of property tax to the town of Ocean Ridge. There are many other calculations that occur on your property tax bill, and Ocean Ridge is just a line item. For the 2019-20 tax year, the total amount of property tax generated through this process can be found on Florida Department of Revenue Form 420MM. That value for Ocean Ridge is $5.615 million. If we look at the PAPA data, that their snapshot of the town, when you roll up all the properties in the town, you end up with $5.599 million of valuation. A very small difference, and it probably just means that one property somehow changed during the time frame of the snapshot versus when the Form 420 was generated by the county. It's a dynamic database, and $16,000 difference is not a large amount. Based on the total taxable base from the Form 420 is $1,046,678,000 and change. When PAPA calculated the value, again, it was extremely close. It was $1,046,577,000 and change. So I think that validates that there's agreement between the two systems. So let's take a look at what Ocean Ridge looks like. Let's look at the slide that would be titled on the top, PAPA Taxable Values 2019. Can you put that up, Kathy?
Hang on just a second. What is it titled?
Ocean Ridge PAPA Taxable Values 2019. It looks like, I believe that's it. Is that correct?
It says all land codes on it.
It would be all land codes. That's, I think, an individual one.
So
No, keep going down. Is that it? I can't, can you read that, John? Does that say all land codes underneath the title?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. Do you have that available to you at home, Art and Roy?
Yes, we do.
Thank you.
I do, yeah.
Okay.
I do also, thank you.
Okay. So, looking at this data, it refers to those parcels in the town that would be defined as taxable. The town has more parcels. Town Hall sits on a parcel. The county beach access parking, the Boynton Beach beachfront park, those are non-taxable entities within this area. They've all been excluded. There's 1,471 parcels here. I'll get into a little discussion of land codes here in a second, but this is the total tax base that agrees with the Form 20 from PAPA. So looking at this, it's clearly evident that our community is a non-normal distribution. If you look at this, you can see that let's look at the taxable values. The mean value is $734,000. If you look at the scale on the bottom, you'll see that is probably only a third of the way from the left-hand side of the chart. So what this chart tells us is it's skewed. The skew number is 9. That means the peak of the curve, the wave, is on the left of the chart. So that's what generates that number. The kurtosis is extremely high. It means that our data is also highly influenced by all that high-value property to the right that's tailing off to the right. That's having a heavy influence on any statistical information that you get out of this chart. The standard deviation is extremely high, so even within one standard deviation, you will exceed the limits of the chart on the left-hand side. So you can see here, we have a high number of properties at valuations below $250,000. We have a small number of properties, but highly influential, that are above a valuation of approximately $3 million. Going down underneath it to the property tax, the curve is the same. The only information that is changing is the valuation at the bottom is your property tax instead of your taxable value of your property. And so the curve is going to be the same, and it looks like the scale at the bottom has got some really odd numbers, but if you pick a number on the top chart, such as a $100,000 property, and then come down to the chart below it, you will see that that same column has a value of $535. That's showing you that there's $5.35 per $1,000 of valuation. So I made the scale equal units of millage rather than some other arbitrary dollar number. So if you go to $1 million house and come down, you'll find that the scale at the bottom is $535,000. So same information, but you can see the very wide disparity in property taxes. That's for the overall town. I then broke the town down by land codes. I'd like to talk a little bit about land codes. When the property appraiser looks at a town or looks at county property, they're not interested in whether we have local zoning that's unique to our town. They're not looking at RSE, they're not looking at RSF, they're not looking at RMM, medium-sized density, they're not looking at RHM. They're looking at land codes that cross all municipalities. So they're looking at a list. Do you have a chart, please, that has land codes on it?
I'm sorry, I'm gonna need better direction. I'm
Yeah,
coordinating a lot. Is it this one?
Yeah, it's that one.
Okay. Thank you.
I don't want that one right now. There's actually the same chart without percentages on it. That's going to distract people. So I did one with, there we go. I did one without it.
Okay.
So that's looking at land code use, and land code to the county is looking at 0-100 single family. That's our RSE and RSF properties. It's looking at 0-110 townhouses. Some examples of that within the community would be the Ocean Ridge Yacht Club, Pelican Cove, Diamond Beach. It's looking at 0-300 multi-family properties. An example of that would be Palm Properties on Douglas. We have another category, and this one is, I'm not quite sure of the separation. Obviously, it must have to do with the homeowners association ways of running the communities, but there's a differentiation between condominiums and cooperatives. So 0-400 is condominiums. Examples here are Turtle Beach, Inlet Plaza, Ocean Walk, and Portofino. And 510 is co-ops. Examples of co-ops would be Colonial Ridge. It would be Capri, would be 6767 North Ocean, and the Muse. There's a distribution there of the numbers of properties that fall into those categories. And on the right is, correction, the numbers of those properties that the owners of those properties have filed for a homestead exemption. Let's just leave that right there for that at this particular time. Could you put me up the slide that has assessed value single-family homes on it, please?
Which slide number is it? Which graph number?
I don't have the graph number here. It would say assessed value 0100 single-family on the...
So after this, okay.
Okay, so this is a subset of that master community taxable or assessed. I think we're focusing on taxable, so it would be the bottom graph, which is taking the homestead exemption out of the assessed value. So there's the range of single-family homes, again, not quite as skewed and non-normal as the total one, but still not a normal distribution. Let's do townhouses, please, 0110, which will be the next chart. Okay. This is the closest to normal distribution in the town. We just have a little bit of a camel type double high, and that's just the fact that there's two unique sets of townhouses that cause that, but the range and distribution of those is more in the middle brackets of the overall town. Let's go to condos and co-ops. Okay, this is the largest population in the town. 769 properties fall into this category. You can see the range here is heavily to the lower valuations, and the number of properties that fall under $250,000 is a big percentage of our community. Multifamily would be the last of these. It's not a high number of properties. It's a more normal statistical distribution. The kurtosis is only 4 and the skewness is 2. So this one is much higher confidence, but it's not highly influential in the data. Could you put the other slide up, please, that has, excuse me, this one I didn't plot because I'm not trying to sell real estate. This one is the number of vacant lots in the town. I did calculate the data. It's in the 2 blocks on the left. There's what is the number? I believe it's 46 properties. 57, excuse me. Available vacant land, and I have the distribution for anybody that is interested, but I didn't want to make it part of this presentation. Can we go back to the other slide now that has the data with the percentages on homestead. I'd like to discuss homestead a little bit.
Okay, the one with the,
Pardon me, we'll get to it in here in a second. There we go.
this one.
That's it.
So we're looking at a slide now, Roy and Art, that shows the land use codes, and then it has a separate calculation of percentages on it. Have you been able to find that one?
I've got it. Thank you.
So an interesting piece of information that comes out of doing this is looking at valuations and what the effect of homesteads are on those valuations, and it's clearly influenced by more single-family homes. 67% of single-family homes are homesteaded. The value of homestead is either $50,000 or $25,000. For all these properties are homesteaded, the impact of the homestead amount is less because the valuation of single-family homes is high. So if we're talking about $1 million or $2 million properties, and we're either taking $50,000 or $25,000 of homestead valuation out of them to get the taxable valuation, that impact is a small percentage, okay? But when we look at condominiums or co-ops, the number of homesteads drops to 32%, but when we're looking at a $250,000 or $150,000 assessed value condominium or co-op, and now we take out $50,000 or $25,000 of homestead valuation, the impact on the tax bill is significant. The other indicator that popped out to me when I'm looking at homestead, we are looking at a process where we're trying to not only figure out what the support for septic to sewer would be, we're also trying to figure out how we are going to pay for septic to sewer. And what these homestead numbers say to me is homesteading is highly indicative, high correlation with whether you're a full-time resident and or a registered voter. This process goes, and I got a slide, and it's something I think we are going to have to address at a later meeting. I don't think it's for this meeting, but it's titled Users, Approvers, and Payers. We start out with the gross metrics that Lisa and Ron generated, which is the large number of users, and we refine that number down. We go through how many residences there are, we go through how many taxable parcels there are. Through looking at homesteading, we can probably imply that of the people that are even taxable parcel owners, not all of them are going to be voters. The decision of whether we're going to go forward and whether something is going to pass or fail is going to depend on whether you're homesteaded, whether you vote, where your voting population falls in the town. Is it in the single family area? Is it in the multifamily area? And what are the implications that other things that metrics that we've generated here entail? if you live in a condominium that has a high number of users, but you have just solved your sewer treatment plant problem, or you are in a condominium that's just had a large assessment to get 10 more years out of your sewage treatment plant, it's going to influence how you view all this data. If you are if you're in an area that is high valuation versus low valuation, your portion of how your property taxes are going to be impacted by the process that we're going to do is going to play into your politics. So I just wanted to draw this up and make people aware of the dynamics. We need to talk about some of these dynamics because the way we are going to fund going forward is going to be highly influenced by this, whether we're going to have an up and down vote commission-wise, whether we're going to have a referendum, whether that election is going to be on an issue that has been voluntarily entered into, or whether we're going to have a situation where the voting is going to be on something that has been mandated, all affects the decisions that were highlighted by the last commission meeting. I'm now going to move into the money, the penny sales tax, into whether we have try to get a $250 assessment to move forward. And I would like to turn the floor over to the town manager, who I think has quite a few comments on that subject, and then I'll open the meeting to each of the members of my committee that I hope to get input from on all these particular items. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. The Town Commission met for their goal-setting workshop on May 4th, and they also held a budget workshop on June 1st. One of the Town Commission's goals this year is to continue exploring septic to sewer conversion, contingent on analyzing our revenue loss and increased expenditures related to the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm currently watching the revenues and expenditures very closely, and we're analyzing the impacts due to COVID. However, we're a couple months away from knowing what the true impacts will be, because some of our intergovernmental revenues, like our sales tax and our revenue sharing from the state, have a lag time of about 2 months. At the June 1st budget meeting, the Commission discussed the revenues and expenditures associated with septic to sewer conversion. On the expense side, the proposed budget for FY21 did not include any funding for septic to sewer conversion, as we're currently looking at a budget shortfall of around $800,000, and that is based on decreased revenues due to the pandemic at this time. Expenditures related to septic to sewer are Raftellus Financial Consultants, town engineer engagement, town attorney engagement, and a grant administrator. The Town Commission would like this committee to discuss the expenditures that would be needed for FY21 to continue with this study. Once that is completed, the expenditures can be incorporated into the next version of the budget, which will be submitted to the Town Commission for their July 6th budget workshop. And then the Commission will decide whether they want to fund continuing septic to sewer or remove it from the budget due to shortfalls related to the pandemic. On the revenue side of that, the Town Commission revisited their decision to allocate the penny sales tax infrastructure to the septic to sewer conversion. The discussion is on hold until the next budget meeting, as we're waiting for more information regarding the loss in revenues related to COVID. I've attached the draft minutes of the town commission meetings for you all so that you could review the discussions in depth. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. I do have some numbers that I calculated for you to let you know what is coming up or what we have expended already so that you're aware.
Tracy, we've had a request for you to speak louder and closer to the mic.
All right, gotcha. I got it. Okay, so is this better? If you wanted to engage Raftellus, the approximate cost is around $30,000. We don't have the complete estimate on what that would be yet, but it's estimated around $30,000. The town attorney fees for attending your meetings are around $5,000 for the year. The town engineer did the septic to sewer feasibility study. That was $25,000 that came out of the current budget. But if you want to continue engaging her to do data and to attend your meetings, that's going to be an additional approximate $15,000 for next year. And then we have the grant administration costs. If we hire the grant administrator to apply and administer the planning grant, that's going to be around $6,000. So I'm estimating with Raftellus to move forward for next year's budget for septic to sewer conversion, it will be around $56,000. If you take Raftellus out of that, it's still going to be cost us at least $26,000, and it could be more than that. Based on
If the other committee members are in agreement, I would like to start out making some comments. Is it okay if I go first?
Go for it.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Let's address what I think is the easy part. I think we've done an exceptional job over the last year of looking at the technical aspects. I think that was Ingenuity's biggest input. I think we're at the stage of a concept plan. Now, that's not saying that we have an engineering plan, but I think that's quite far down the road. But concept plan, I think, is done. I think their input in the next year is extremely minimal. I don't think that the topics that we would have to go forward with are technical in nature, and I definitely think that we can limit Lisa's budget input. In terms of legal input, the less we fight, the less we pay.
Well, so just so you're aware, each time Brian attends the meeting, it's around $400. If it's a 2-hour meeting, if it goes longer than that, it's.
I didn't realize it was that inexpensive, so maybe we can fight more.
Sign them up.
And then anytime we pick up the phone to call Lisa and her firm, that is a charge to us. So that's.
Now, what if she called me?
Same thing.
You didn't tell me that.
I didn't charge you for
Pro bono. So just so you're aware, okay?
I have tried to limit it. I think we can really limit it going forward. And I think there will be a couple of items. I think an item that will engage Brian will be the $250 a year assessment issue. I will be asking for some input from him. The rest of it, I think, if we looked at the grants, to address the grants, I think one of the biggest inputs we got was from our state rep, Mr. Caruso, that attended the last meeting. The comment he made at the last meeting was our chance of getting grants is way better if it's matching funds. So I would still, even in this COVID environment, I would still like to endorse trying to get a grant. I would like to see if is there a way that we can contract for getting a grant rather than administering a grant at this point, that could we break that cost down into two components and only pay for the first part?
No, because once you receive your grant, you need an administrator for
No,
it.
I understand that. But if we didn't get a grant, doesn't that affect the cost of what we're paying him?
Yes. Yes.
So wouldn't that put it into two components?
Yes.
Okay, so I would try to do that. In terms of getting a grant, to me, the most significant grant would be the first one that I would envision as paying Raftellus. So I would like to take the data that Ingenuity and Mr. Kern generated. I would still like to do the one grant, and I would like to go looking for things that would pay the Raftellus bill. I would not advocate paying Raftellus at this juncture for septic to sewer.
Yeah, and that's why I took it out of the cost, taking into that into consideration.
I understand the town may be engaged still with Raftellus for the water pipe issue. Your resolution of the water pipe issue with Boynton and your how you work with Raftellus is definitely going to roll over into our domain. That would be my only uncertainty on that particular part of that subject. Do committee members endorse those concepts, or please speak up?
Well, with the budget shortfall, it seems like we're almost putting the cart before the horse in a way, is that like, we don't know if there's money even available at this point for any of this, correct? Isn't that correct?
Correct. I mean, we're looking at a budget shortfall of $800,000 right now. That means taking revenues out of your reserves to fund your budget for next year.
So I think with the things that I've said, we're pretty low footprint.
Yeah, no, it's not. Once you take Raftellus out of it, I agree with that. And one thing, just talking to people in town, is education is so important. People don't understand the basic concept of what we're even doing here. And I don't know if there's room in the budget to start thinking about education. Otherwise, it's never going to pass. People don't understand it at all, not even slightly. And I think we really need to look hard at that. And you, Kim, you did a great job, and Ron and Lisa and Neil, you all did a great job. But education is going to be vitally important, or it's not going to go anywhere. People are just going to see a big bill, and they're going to turn it down immediately. And I think it's time to start educating the public. And so I don't know if there's room in this or not. I don't think it'd be an expensive item, but I think it's necessary. But if there's room in the budget to do it, I think we should go. I like Neil's idea, to go with this.
Mr. Kern?
Wow. After the discussion that we just had on who's going to pay the bill, I'm just wondering at what point in time would there ever be an appetite to do this, and who's going to pay? Not that I believe it's a good or a bad idea, but there's a large population of the town that's not going to be affected by this decision. And in my opinion, it brings there's an environmental side of this. There's no doubt that that's the right thing to do. I'm not going to say to discount that completely. But what I am going to say is that if this project is net $20 million, there's only excuse the term, a handful of people, because of the statistics that you just presented, that are going to pay for it.
That is correct.
And frankly, just from a political sense, that's not going to fly.
I think I would like to have another whole meeting on this feasibility, doability, desirability. That's why I introduced the chart that went from users to payers. I think that's the next avenue that we have to look at. I know I have strong feelings. I know Mr. Zev also has strong feelings. We have to look at two scenarios. We have to look at what is the appetite to voluntarily go down this road, but we likewise have to look at if we're forced to swallow this involuntarily, we still have to figure out the dynamics of how it's going to evolve under that scenario.
Well, that's an interesting point, because right now, it's not mandated.
I agree with you. Totally agree.
So So why, to have a plan is not a bad idea. To have a plan in case all of a sudden this is mandated. I had an opportunity to talk to Representative Caruso one-on-one.
Yes.
About this, okay? And I asked him because he's in favor of moving things from septic to sewer. He made that clear at the town commission meeting, and it's also a matter of public policy for him. But on the other hand, he doesn't know when barrier islands are going to be mandated to do it. He couldn't tell me whether that's going to be an executive order from the governor or it's something that they vote on in Tallahassee.
Right.
So at this point in time, we're kind of on standby. We can be proactive and we can be ready, but it'll be.
And I think those are the two operative words. And I want to commend the other members of the committee. I think we have done a fairly straightforward assessment without interjecting what our personal preferences would be for saying that we're an environmentalist, that saying we're an advocate, or saying we're going to drag our feet until, they're bloody going over the pavement before we vote for some expenditure or recommendation of expenditure to the commission. I think to keep it on that basis, I think we have to just look at the two scenarios of what is the appetite to voluntarily do it, and what is the consequences of how we would do it if we have to do it. And obviously, there's a different time frame for those two things, but I think we have to look at what has to be facilitated or in place to give us those options. Some of the things that would have to be done, it doesn't matter whether it's voluntary or involuntary. And I think those are the things that we should still advocate doing. And I still think those things that I'm going to espouse going forward with, I think they give the town other flexibilities. I don't think they pigeonhole the town. I think there are things that if we have monies, I don't think they're totally earmarked. I think we're just one of a category of things that it could be used for. The penny tax is an example. It's got a range of things that it was designed to let towns do. I think we're just one of them, but I think we're going to go into that subject here in a couple of minutes. But I'm clearly on board with you, John, that once we get into now a more subjective realm, I think we're going to start hearing from people in the town as to what they want to do or don't want to do.
What about we float a balloon out there, a trial balloon, the questionnaire, and just see what kind of appetite there is, and simplify it? I mean, don't make it complex.
Well, I would like to have a workshop again where that's what we discuss. Yeah. I'm on board with that. I don't think we can do anything other than that. Any comments, Art or Roy, please?
This is Arthur, if you can hear me okay.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I want to go back to one of the comments that John made about education. Clearly agree that that's important, but I think one of the key components of that will be, okay, how much is it going to cost under the different possible mechanisms? I think in order to get to that information, you're going to need the Raftellus analysis. That's just want to make that one point. But let me make a larger point, which has to do with what money should be spent at this point in time. And so here comes the Arthur Ziv curveball. Given the $800,000 budget deficit, given that there is no mandate in place and we don't know when that mandate is going to be in place, given that the infrastructure surtax is currently allocated to septic to sewer, if I understand correctly.
I don't believe that's necessary, that in fact it is dedicated.
It is. So far, it is. The town commission dedicated that by a vote. They're revisiting that right now.
Solely to septic to sewer?
Correct. They're revisiting that decision based on the revenue streams that are coming in now. They're re-looking at that.
Because if you go back into the minutes, we did not ask for a dedication solely to septic to sewer. Our recommendation was for an infrastructure fund that we were a party of. Now, are you saying it's dedicated to septic to sewer from that recommendation or from the committee that is part of planning and zoning?
No, the town commission took recommendations from this committee and decided at one of their meetings, I don't remember which one, I'll have to pull up the minutes, but to dedicate the penny sales tax to septic to sewer. They are now revisiting that because of the shortfalls.
Okay. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Art. Please continue. I would like to revisit the penny tax here in another few minutes whenever we can. Go ahead.
Okay. Certainly. Thanks for getting that clarification. So my point is that in light of the budget situation, the fact that there is no mandate at this time to address, and the fact that those monies are currently allocated, I would like to propose, because I think this was one of the questions that the commission was asking of us, is that to unallocate or reallocate all those funds to eligible infrastructure improvements that could then help to reduce the budget deficit in the coming year, because I frankly think that that is of a higher priority than incurring any expenses related to our role and examination of septic to sewer at this specific point in time. That doesn't mean that as a committee we can't continue to meet and discuss and explore things, but I think it's more important that all the funds go to be applied to reduce the budget deficit. Thank you.
I have a question, Tracy. The fact that there's money in that fund, is that in fact reducing our deficit?
No. So what happens is during the budget process, you have a line item for your penny sales tax that goes into the budget. What happens is at the end of the budget year, if those funds were not allocated for a specific project, those funds roll into your reserves at the end of the year. Now, the town commission decided that those funds would be restricted funds for septic to sewer. They're now looking at unrestricting them possibly due to shortfalls that we have. However, when you look at your budget document, your budget shortfall of 800,000, that is coming from reserves. So it's hard to explain. I'd have to bring the documents in and show you exactly what I mean.
Well, I think what I,
Tracy?
excuse me, go ahead.
Tracy?
Yes.
Tracy, you said that budget shortfall is coming and it's from something, and then it broke up. I didn't hear what you said.
Okay. So the budget shortfall is made up by using your reserves of the town, the 800,000. Your penny sales tax is a revenue line item in your budget. If it's not used, it goes into reserves. Right now, it's restricted reserves for septic to sewer.
Okay, so if we are not in fact drawing on those funds, which I don't believe we are or plan to, A, we're not affecting the amount that's in that fund that is restricted. It's still going to go into reserves, so our impact on it is zero.
Correct.
Okay, so the only thing that differs is whether that fund is in total dedicated to us or to anything that's infrastructure. And I don't think, if I'm reading those minutes correctly from February, we did not ask for it to be only septic to sewer. We asked for an infrastructure fund. And we asked that septic to sewer be one of those items that it could be used for, not that it would be solely ours.
You already have the infrastructure fund based on the penny sales tax, though. It's the penny sales tax is your infrastructure
Okay,
fund.
okay. So if some other infrastructure item came up, I'm not saying that it wouldn't be inappropriate then for the town to, it's well within the purview of the commission to decide that they would need to draw on that item. In the meantime, what is the, since it rolls only into reserve, what is the purpose of relabeling it at this point then? It's an exercise only in titling. It's not an exercise in changing the monies.
That's correct.
Okay.
What's the amount in it?
Right now, we have about $400,000 in it. At the end of the 10-year period, we're expected to have $1 million. However, that is being impacted right now because the sales tax revenues have tanked due to the pandemic.
So the 400,000 is dedicated strictly for septic to sewer?
Correct. At this point, unless the town commission revisits that and says, we're going to unrestrict those funds and now it's for any infrastructure project in the town.
So we can't make any financial decisions until that's decided, right?
So Tracy, then, if I understand you correctly, then my comment is incorrect. You're saying that the town cannot use any of those monies, that if the town uses any of those monies in the infrastructure fund to pay costs of certain capital improvements in the budget, that will not decrease the budget deficit?
Correct. Art, I will get with you after the meeting and show you the budget line items and explain further.
Okay. Well, then, if that's the case, then, why not spend, all of it? I mean, why not do Raftellus? Why not pay the attorney, the engineer, and the contract advisor?
We're talking about revenue versus expenditure. So if you want to expend funds to work on this project, that is going to impact your budget. The revenue portion is already shown in the budget.
This is Neil speaking. At this particular time, I see little value in the timing, the early timing of using Raftellus money. If in fact we get a grant, we may be able to save that expenditure from coming out of our budget. I would like to pursue that first, because I don't think anything Raftellus is going to give us is, what's the word, important right now. I don't think it's urgent. There's no urgency. I'm not saying Raftellus doesn't have value to us. I'm saying I don't think they have value to us right now.
This is Arthur. I don't necessarily disagree with you. My point was simply that if using these funds, if there's not a way to use these funds to benefit reduce the budget deficit, then I'm saying then we should consider using them as we feel is appropriate to move the project or the analysis forward.
I think what I'm saying is by having the infrastructure fund and letting that increase, there clearly are going to be infrastructure issues coming up, whether it be septic to sewer, if it got mandated, or if we volunteered to go early, or if there are drainage issues or whatever that the commission, in their best judgment, can go into that fund, and then at that point, it is clearly going to be beneficial to the budget. In the meantime, I think just the nature of that fund, they have to sit there for certain particular types of uses. Am I not correct?
No, you're correct.
Yeah, so I don't think we're that far apart. I think it's semantics. To go on back to the penny sales tax, whether we look at septic to sewer as standalone or whether we look at it as part of the greater picture in the town of an infrastructure project, we have, I think, a disagreement among certain groups of us in the town as to how infrastructure should be dealt with. This is my personal opinion, and I'm of the school that when you can plan ahead and you have the luxury of time, it's cheaper overall to save rather than delay and finance. So I'm an advocate of taking things like a penny sales tax and letting it accumulate the same way we would save for our kids' college. It's cheaper to be able to pay for it than to burden somebody 5 or 10 years down the line with getting a loan and paying that loan back at some onerous long-term scenario. So that's why I would like to see the penny sales tax continue. It's also why I would advocate that to Brian to help us facilitate a way to look at doing an assessment. We may have to be creative in the way that we structure the assessment, that we tie it into whatever metrics that make it viable and fair. But you know, going back to what Representative Caruso said, our chances of getting funding are going to be better when we can match what we're asking for. The next increment of what we're going to have to ask for is going to be something in the range of $3 to $5 million. We need to have our half of that package to be able to do it. Now, if sewer never happens, that money's there for something else the town needs to do that's infrastructure. If if we keep going the same way we have with drainage bonds and the town hall bond, those bonds are $460,000 a year for the drainage bond, $312,000 a year for the town hall bond. Each person in the town is paying $313 for that drainage bond every year. We're paying $212 per taxpayer for the town hall bond. That's $525 that's been going for years and has got years to go. I'm asking you to plan ahead, put $250 aside, and you'll be able to pay for a $3 to $5 million engineering plan to do sewer, or perhaps do another drainage issue 5 or 6 years down the road that you'll be able to pay for out of funds. To me, that's a big philosophical difference, and many of the communities that are around us, that's the approach they take. I'm off my soapbox. Comments from somebody else?
Haven't heard from Roy.
Anyone online? So I think that's the areas we were going to cover for this meeting.
So we do need to make a recommendation to the commission. We have to have a recommendation by the end of this meeting on expenditures related to septic to sewer. So if you would like your town attorney to keep attending your meetings, I have to put an expenditure in the budget for that. If you would like to continue to have Lisa attend your meetings or to be able to call her for information, I need to put that in the budget. If you would like to go ahead with a planning grant, I need to put some money in the budget for Ryan to...
Okay, can I make a motion? Would you like them single items at a time?
Sure.
Okay. I'd like to, how would we say it, minimize, I think we could take Lisa Trepepi out of the cost. And I think we can, do we just say we don't need Brian at all, or we need Brian less? How do we? No, I'm just trying to, how do we put this in a motion? I just want to show that we're past the hump on expenses.
Right, here's my suggestion, and Tracy, you can chime in on this.
Please go ahead, Brian.
But what you, okay, sorry. Okay, so what you may want to say is just that staff will be present if requested by the town manager or by the board themselves. So that way, based on what is coming up, what is being discussed, you all can make the recommendation, or if Tracy sees something, and considering how budget conscious she is, she probably will not be calling me or Lisa to show up anytime soon. So I'm just kind of thinking
Okay, so
that's what you want to say.
could we say that it's the committee's, the committee expects minimal involvement by the engineer and the attorney unless the town manager or the committee chair sees an exceptional need?
I think that would be fine. It's kind of like the staff, outside staff is not, or the engineer and the attorney are not going to be required to show up to these meetings unless requested to do so by the committee or by the town manager.
I'd like to put a number to it.
Yeah.
I see no reason why we can't eliminate any funding for Rafellis at this time.
I was going to make that a separate one, but if you want to go ahead, so make that the next motion, go ahead.
Yeah, and my motion would be not to engage Rafellis. I would put in, because we always may need some legal advice, $1,000 for the town attorney. If you want to do it to $1,200, at his very, very reasonable rate. And then the town engineer, there will be some technical questions. I suggest $3 $3,000 for that. And then the grant cost of $6K, total $10,000. It shouldn't be a major issue going forward. I recommend that we tell the town commission that we'll need $10,000 in the next fiscal year.
Did that motion cover all of your? Okay, do I hear a second?
I'll second it. Yeah, I like that.
Let's put it up to a vote. Do I hear,
Well, it's going to be a discussion.
or discussion, excuse me? Art, Roy?
No, I'm good with that. I wasn't ready to say aye.
Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 One or two remote? I couldn't tell.
I think they were both ayes.
Was that both ayes remotely?
Yes.
Thank you. It's unanimous. On the 1% tax, I'd like to make a motion that we continue with the 1% tax. That we not cut it in half like the commission
The one-
discussed.
Are you talking about
The
the
1%
penny
sales tax?
Pennies-
The
it's
penny
not 1%,
tax.
It's
1
penny
cent.
tax, yeah.
Okay. I s-
So make a motion to do what?
That we continue it as 1%.
1 cent?
Excuse me, 1 cent. To me, it's 1% and 1 is still the same thing, but, okay.
I don't understand your motion, though. I don't-
The town commission had a discussion as to cutting it in half and using the other half somewhere else. I would like this committee to recommend that we keep it at the 1 cent. Dedicated, yes. The total amount, yes.
Dedicated to us, to septic to
Dedicated
sewer?
to septic to sewer or infrastructure in general.
Well, Tracy says that right now it's dedicated to us, so I would like to see
So
it
be
stay
it.
there.
But they can take that away at the next meeting, right?
That's
And they
always-
very may well.
That is correct. I'm just taking a committee position or asking for a committee endorsement. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Was that Mr. Shines?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Aye.
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 I think it's unanimous, thank you.
No, it's not.
There was a what? I'm sorry.
No from Arthur.
I'm sorry, Arthur, I didn't hear you. I wasn't being disrespectful.
No, I understand. My vote is no.
Okay, thank you. So, 4-1 then? A motion on continuing to endorse or having an assessment for infrastructure in general. Is there any support for that on the committee?
Can you explain
Explain
it a little
explain
further?
again what you mean?
Yeah.
That's the idea of coming up with a more encompassing assessment to get us beyond the 1%. The 1 cent tax won't, over a 5-year period, won't even get us to half of what we need to do an engineering plan. So that money's going to have to come from somewhere else. We either look, I'm advocating that we look to do an assessment, and an assessment means it's a shared cost per parcel owner rather than evaluation-based amount that would happen if later on we needed to access funds and the commission had to raise the millage rate or had to take it out of the general fund. I would like to see us start, I would like this committee to advocate to the commission that the town begin an infrastructure assessment fund. We would just be one potential user.
May I ask a question, please?
So that, so my motion would be that the committee endorses asking the commission to look at an infrastructure, a townwide infrastructure assessment towards a fund for future infrastructure expenditures.
I think Mr. Zev had a question.
Okay, I'm not hearing you, Art, but please go ahead. Brian's hearing you.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Great. You referenced a $3 million amount. Are you saying that's for the engineering costs, or that's our share of the engineering costs? Could you explain where that dollar amount comes from and what it is?
Okay, it's going to take $3 to $5 million to go from a concept that we have to an engineering plan, getting it through the bureaucracy and getting permits, approvals for us to then go to an implementation stage. That's an assessment from Boynton, from the FLOVAC chairman, and from Ingenuity. We're ballparking the number, and it's obviously way more than we're ever going to get with the penny tax.
So $3 to $5 million for design?
For design, go ahead. Do you want to make a comment, Lisa?
Can you hear me? There's a rule of thumb, if you will, with respect
10 to 15%, yeah.
with respect to the cost, the overall cost of a project, and how you relate to what we call soft costs. And one of the soft costs would be engineering and permitting and the coordination from soup to nuts. And that percentage is approximately 10%. So if you're talking about a $30 million project, over the years, it'll probably cost you about $3 million. That's just a basic estimate. When we talk about soft costs, sometimes I know people don't want to hear it, but it comes out to be fairly significant. It could be almost a quarter of what the construction costs are when you talk about engineering, legal, and administrative fees. So keep that in mind.
So Lisa, may I ask a question? So if it's a $30 million infrastructure project, you're saying it's going to be a total of $33 million because it's $30 million for the infrastructure and $3 million for the soft cost? For engineering, legal?
I don't remember what the septic to sewer report was, if it was exactly $30 million construction costs, not including engineering, legal, administration. When we do reports, we usually talk about contingencies or soft costs that could add up to about 25% of the construction cost.
Yeah, it could be as high as $5 million if it's 15%. So, and I don't think the actual number is as important as the process.
If I might comment on your motion, $250. I assume that's not on a beneficial interest basis, but on a flat rate. No matter how you look at it, that's a town tax.
Absolutely,
it's a
I'm
tax.
not arguing that.
And with a shortfall of where we sit financially, I could not support a I know you want to make a reserve fund out of this. This is basically what you're doing. You're taking 250.
That's correct.
Which is only going to be about $350,000 based on the number, at a flat rate that's in there.
That's correct.
That's, yes, okay.
It's
so it takes it from-
$368,000, so you're very close.
Good number.
Right, and it's $1.84 million in 5 years.
The math degree is paying off. Anyway, the idea that we should try to get the town, every single homeowner to do that, I don't think it has much appetite. I see that as a town, the commission should put this as a budgeted line item. And if there's no appetite for that this year or next year, I wouldn't support at this time, a general type of assessment.
And if I may, can I just say a couple of very general comments on special assessments? Normally, for a special assessment, you kind of need to know what the final number is going to be, which means you have plans in place and things like that. Further, on a special assessment, especially something like this, chances are people would not be specially assessed the same amount.
That's what I meant by
Because
beneficial
it's
interest.
going to be based, because the criteria that you have on a special assessment, it is the amount of benefit as relates to the amount of payment that they have to make, so there has to be a proportional benefit to the payment that is made. So if someone has a house with, I don't know, say 10 bathrooms versus someone who has a condo unit with 1 bathroom or something, that they will not be assessed the same way. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. Also, this is not a tax because we don't have the ability to tax. It would be, we would have to specially assess, which means there's a lot of protocol that we would have to go through in order to do that. I just wanted to make a quick comment on that.
I just wanted to go on record that the committee, and this, obviously I'm speaking as an individual, but I was hoping that the committee would be finding a way to endorse long-term planning. I think it's absent right now. I'm unsure of the vehicle. I'm not, by the fact that I'm asking us to endorse the idea, I'm very cognizant of the reality of the budget. I'm very cognizant of the dynamics on the commission, and I'm not necessarily expecting the commission to endorse, approve, or whatever. I don't think that's our job. It's the commission's job to decide whether to proceed with recommendations. It's the commission's job to decide what's in the town's financial best interest, but it's our job to endorse what we feel is necessary to improve the infrastructure. It is Brian's job to figure out how it's legal. It is Tracy's job to figure out what other towns have done to do this. I know it is being done, I know that it has been done, and I know that nothing will get done in this town on this project until that fund is available. So that's where I stand. I'm a realist, and I'm not going to back off on what I think makes sense based on the politics of what happens to it after, or whether we endorse it or not. So I will still keep the motion there, and if it doesn't pass, I understand. But my motion still
One comment
stands.
I'd like to make, please.
Go ahead.
I do believe, I know that, Neil, your view is that, the more that we can pay with funds on hand, the lower the financing costs, and that may very well be true. However, it is possible to go ahead and finance those soft costs. So you don't need to have them in the bank at the time you move forward with the project. That's been my personal experience.
I'm well aware of that. All I'm saying is the vagaries of the budget are going to change over the years, and money that's dedicated and already saved is money well saved. And anything that we finance in the future, we will pay for it in multiples. And I think this is something that we have the foresight to see a timeline, and I just don't think looking at financing these things in the future is the way I would proceed. So I understand that it's a personal perspective, and I'm just advocating. And I know Ron Kern, perhaps, he's looking at the current condition. But the current condition is going to change multiple times over the lifetime of a project like this. We're talking about a project that if we started accumulating today, would take us 5 years to be shovel ready to go. And it's a project that will probably outlive my lifetime before everybody in this town's flushing on a sewer.
Voice my opinion real quick. I think there are too many unknowns at this point to really pursue this. I think we could talk about it at another meeting, and it's just too early to bring it up at this point. So I would not go along with the recommendation at this time. It just, there's no rush for this. We don't need to solve this today. So that's my opinion.
You still have a motion on the table.
I still have a motion on the table. Is there a second or not? Okay, motion dies. Anything else anyone would like to bring up? Please, Tracy.
Neil, can we find out if Ryan from RMPK Funding is on the phone? He had some information on a planning grant that he wanted to share with you.
I don't see him on the list.
Okay.
Okay. Future meetings, please? Do we have a future agenda or a need for a future meeting?
I don't know. We've got.
Art, Roy?
We have the data now. It was going to eventually move into the money, and I think that puts this at a stall.
Puts us at what, sir?
At a stall.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can continue with, we've asked for $10,000 to move certain things forward, which may give us a grant to pay for some of the work that we need to get done. If we got a grant, that'd be different. But right then, I think we've gone about as far as we can at this point. I don't know where to go next with this. I wouldn't know what objective to come up with next. Okay, to say we should be at this level. I'm very interested in what the town commission is going to do, because that penny sales tax right now, that $400,000 sitting there, they're going to vote whether that thing stays like that or it gets moved to other infrastructure issues. Any savings in that area for septic to sewer could vanish. It may not, but it could.
No, I clearly understand that,
therefore,
and I made the statement that if that money disappears, we won't get a grant, we won't be going anywhere.
Well, that,
We have to wait till they
we'll have to
decide.
wait. I gotta wait and see.
But
You have
it-
to
the
wait
dis-
and see.
And we've just made a recommendation, but we don't make the decision.
There you go.
And I advocated, and I didn't get endorsed, and that's not a decision we were going to make either. It was just a recommendation. I think we're sort of at an impasse. I think we need more input from the commission. And I think the subjects we would get into after this are somewhat political in nature. You agree? Anybody?
I agree.
What was the decision or thought on pursuing the grant, because my thought is that even if the funds are not allocated, the infrastructure funds are not allocated specifically to septic and sewer, doesn't prevent the commission, if they come back and we say, yes, this grant's available and it would cost $50,000 in matching funds for them, then to agree to use the $50,000 for that purpose. It doesn't mean it can't be used for septic to sewer. It's just giving them more flexibility. So my original question, are we going to work with the grants person to see what's out there?
I think the first thing we did was Ron Kern recommended that we keep the $6,000, go forward, and we will. And part of what I stated on that subject was that we still try to get a grant, and that we try to get a grant that is in the nature of planning. So does that clarify it?
Yes, so I guess, are you saying that with respect to having another meeting, to the chair, are there topics you want to discuss, or do we wait till we hear back from the grant person?
Okay. I think we have to wait until the next town meeting, see where the commission points us, see where town staff points us, and see where the grant process is proceeding.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
We have some public, if the committee agrees, we have some public comment. Go ahead, please.
Brian, this is Martin Wischolek.
Can you state your name and address for the record?
And close to the mic, please.
Martin Wischolek, 5 Engel Drive. Brian, just to be clear with you, all I'm going to do here is ask technical questions, since we have the experts actually here, and I would like to get a little bit more input for the future commission meeting. Question is, I think you are from Yacht Club, right? Yacht Club has a failing sewer system. Is that correct? My understanding that correct? Well, okay, so that has been fixed.
Can the
Kathy,
person that you're asking identify, could
I'm
she
sorry.
identify herself?
Britt Flanagan from Ocean Ridge Yacht Club.
Okay, Britt Flanagan from Ocean Ridge Yacht Club.
And Ron, how much money would you estimate are you spending in maintenance and repairs on your sewer system that you're working on a, say, yearly basis?
Current budget to run the Colonial Crown Manor disposal system is $120,000 a year, of which the 290 people pay $30 per month.
Okay. How old is Colonial?
The treatment plant is 50 years old. However, it's a concrete plant, and it's inspected, and everything in that plant could easily be replaced. So it has relatively an indefinite lifespan.
And it was built at the time when the building obviously was built. So the buildings are 50 years old, or roughly 50 years old, and so is the plant.
Yeah, that's correct.
And
Ocean Ridge Yacht Club.
30 years old. So Ocean Ridge Yacht Club is 30 years old. Crown Colony is 40 years old.
It's Martin, it's not just Crown Colony. When we talk about what's treated there, it's also Colonial Ridge and Ocean Manor. So it's a combination of the of the three, and they're all within the 40 to 50 year time.
May I interject one other thing? The rehab that we did, there's a 10-year warranty on that rehab
For the work that was done.
Yes, and it essentially was on everything except the lift station. Well, no, there was some work on the
That's all I.
Okay, no other comment? So, we are now June the 10th. Can we skip July and schedule an August meeting? And we'll hold that in abeyance, we'll hold that date and have that meeting subject to input from the commission, from the town manager and myself, and we'll inform the committee members of what's going on. We'll give them an update. Is that appropriate?
Now, I received some dates from Member Kern and his availability for August. He only has one date available, it's August 6th, unless he attends by phone.
Well-
But I'm not sure of the availability of teleconferencing. That's going to depend on the governor's orders.
Okay?
That happens to be the time I'm down here, but if the phone will, if we're still doing via the phone, then that works for me. I don't expect you to change it for one member, so.
I mean, just a quick comment, as long as you have a quorum present.
Yes.
Then you can,
Correct.
other people can, other
Correct.
committee members can teleconference in. So the governor's order just alleviates the requirement for a quorum, but you have a quorum now, so it's, you know, essentially you're kind of operating under your same rules and you could do this again.
Brian, what, do we have to have 4 or 3?
Three.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone online have, or in person here, have difficulty with picking August 6th?
I mean, just a real quick, there are 5 committee members, right?
Correct.
I think I'm okay.
That works. That's fine.
We can accommodate it. Let's do August 6th. Motion to adjourn?
Oh, I'll make it.
Second?
Second.
Unanimous, I hope?
Yeah.
Yes. You bet.
Roy, thank you. Arthur, thank you.
This conference is no longer being recorded.
I'm going to go home and climb back in my shell.